So let's start on my left here. Here we've got a Great Western Railway 5700 class pannier tank. Now, Great Western Railway built hundreds of these at Swindon and at Wolverhampton from about the 1920s onwards, and in effect it virtually became their standard shunting class of engine. This particular one, built at Swindon, spent most of its life working down in South Wales, a lot of the time west of Swansea. Now, London Transport took over the Metropolitan Railway. The Metropolitan Railway was the closest really of all the London Underground lines that closely resembled, if you like, the main line network, the rest of the railways in Britain, in that the Metropolitan Railway, not only did they run passenger services, but they also ran goods services. And of course, outside of the metropolitan section that from Baker Street round to Aldgate, they also ran freight services out into the countryside. So they had a fleet of steam locomotives, and as these became life expired, the ones that London Transport acquired became life expired, London Transport were looking for replacements. Now, it was at that point when the Metropolitan fleet of steam locomotives started to be taken out of service that actually London Transport stopped carrying public goods and concentrated purely on passenger services, and the only work they really needed locomotives for was for engineers' trains, but nevertheless they still had to replace the old Metropolitan engines. So they approached British Railways, who offered them a number of 5700 class pannier tanks, and this was one of them. The 143 and the 144, they're totally different in terms of how you drive them and also how you work them as a guard. So you might be fully qualified and passed out to work as a driver or a guard on these, but to work on that you need to have a conversion course, for want of a better term. So it means until we train everybody up on those, we are limited to how many staff we've got who can work it, whereas these, we've got quite a pool of staff who can work them. So, as I say, she's well through the work that we're planning on doing on her. When she comes back into service again towards the end of the summer, she will be in blue with full yellow ends this time round, so in a 1970s, 80s livery.
Well, there's your wheels for that steam engine.
So first of all, we will talk about this piece, and that in the corner, which isn't doing a lot and is unlikely to do a lot for a while. Class 25. Class 25 is out of service at the moment, has been for quite a while. She's a flood victim. Until they did some work on the Bridge House Beck, just south of the station here, it used to flood on a regular occasion. On one occasion it flooded the shed and the yard, and unfortunately the water got into the traction motors of the 25, and water and electric traction motors don't tend to be easy bedfellows. Consequently, she sort of turned up her toes and said, I don't want to work anymore, and there was a bit of a protracted battle with the insurance company over her, but restoring her back to traffic is not at the moment a priority. We've got the 37 on our own fleet. We've got various other locomotives, we've got 20, various other locomotives as well, that are well capable of hauling a passenger train or a works train, so we don't actually need her to be back in service for the moment. So there is no predictions as to when she will run again. Meanwhile though, over here, one of our working steam fleets. Now this is a British Railways Standard Class 2 260. Built at Darlington Works in 1954. She spent most of her time working around the Wigan area at Springs Branch Shed. don't be fooled by the livery she carried. She's carrying British Railways lined green, which some of these did carry, but the ones that did carry it were allocated to the Western region and worked lines like the Somerset and Dorset and the Cambrian coast. She never carried this livery when she was owned by British Railways. She didn't acquire this until she was actually used on the steam specials on the Cambrian coastline a few years ago, when she was based at Mahuntless Shed. You've noticed she still carries Mahuntless painted on butterbeam, and until very recently, a couple of weeks ago, she had an 89C Mahuntless shed plate on. She's had her 10B shed plate put back on now. And at that point she was repainted into lime green to work the Cambrian coast up to Pwllheli. Now, the main man responsible for designing the standard British Railways standard class locos was a guy by the name of Robert Riddles. Now, Mr. Riddles, he served his apprenticeship under a man by the name of Ivett. Mr. Ivett worked for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway and was their chief mechanical engineer at one point. So he was very much influenced by Ivett. Now, when we go into the stone shed, you will see one of Mr. Ivett's products, and you will notice a similarity between that and this. The main similarity being the sort of diameter and size of the boiler, the shape and design of the cab, and also this high running plate. Little shunters that were, basically little shunters that were very similar in design with slight variation. Probably the one that looked most different from the 08s and the others were the one that Bullitt put together for the Southern. Locomotive. This one was built by Bayer Peacock in Manchester in 1887. It is the oldest working locomotive we've got on the railway. Still regularly steams. Prior to receiving this livery last year, she was in a rather garish green livery. Was nicknamed the Green Dragon. We still affectionately call her the Green Dragon, which dated back to her appearance in the original Railway Children film, when she carried that green livery and was known as the Green Dragon by the Railway Children. She spent most of her life working shunting and local pickup goods in the Manchester area. I saw this running in the steam gala back in February, and of course our steam gala this year was marked by some very wintry weather.
It was.
I nearly didn't get home.
The night before it started we had a very heavy snowfall. In fact, that first morning it was still snowing when I set out from my home up in Keighley to walk up the valley and take some photographs. I came up through Ingro Woods, and this was on the first service down to Keighley, running tender first into a blizzard. And at that time, the crew hadn't rigged up a storm sheet from the back of the cab. Later on in the day, they managed to rig up a storm sheet, but at that first trip down that morning, they were both huddled in this far front recess of the front corner of the cab there, trying to keep out the snow as much as possible. But it certainly gave you a flavour of what it must have been like for the Victorian crews to work locomotives like this in all sorts of weathers without, with minimal protection. So as I say, still working despite her age, and yeah, quite a popular little locomotive, that one. Now, one of the saving graces for railway preservation was at the time the Wooden brothers bought all these steam locomotives from British Railways for scrapping. They were also buying wagons by the dozen. Wagons were easy to deal with as scrap if it had wooden body you could set fire to it. And once the wooden body had been reduced to ash, you were left with the metalwork of the underframe, the wheels, the underframe and everything else, which you could then cut up with a torch and separate out the different types of metal. Steam locomotives were a bit more complex and labour intensive because it involved cutting them up with acetylene torches, and some steam locomotives would have copper fireboxes, other steel fireboxes. There was also copper work and brass work involved in a lot of the steam locomotives as well, which all had to be separated out. So Wood and Brothers concentrated for many, many years on scrapping wagons, while these just sat in the sidings down there, rusting away.